Okay, so now that you've Googled and you know that home education is a legal option in the UK, here is a breakdown of what you should do when you're just considering. Number one, make sure that you have a really good deep dive in researching this subject. It's something that many people like myself have taken decades to learn about. It's a very tricky, difficult subject because nobody can actually teach you how to home educate, because home education is unique for every single child and every single individual. And that's because if you saw my last video, an education has to be suitable to the age, ability and aptitude of the child, as well as taking into account their SEN needs. Now, this law has been edited and added to over the years for good reason. It started out in 1944 with Rob Butler stating that the education of a child had to be at school or otherwise. And that was quite easy to understand, or so we thought. Come along people like Joy Baker, who challenged this situation because the stereotype was that education outside of school wasn't intended for the commoners. It wasn't intended for middle class or the lower classes. It certainly wasn't intended for women to educate children. And so when Joy Baker kind of decided that she was going to follow in her parents' footsteps and her parents' footsteps, the law didn't really like it. And her local authority decided to challenge her at every single turn. And 10 years later, the law, as we now know it, the backbone of it is what we can see. So everyone is afforded this right, no matter what walk of life, culture, religion, sex, anything. Every single person is entitled to home educate their child, and that is a right that we owe to people like Joy Baker. I mean, she wasn't the only one. There were many cases, but Joy was the only one who actually wrote a book about it. So that's why we know now what happened. So the first thing you need to do is research home education in the UK and look at reputable sources like Education Otherwise, Educational Freedom, Ed Yourself. HE Bytes is a good place to look for news that's like really small nuggets to take in. Look at Harriet Patterson, who wrote a book about how to learn to read as a home educated child. Look at Fiona Nicholson and Naomi Fisher. They're all very good. You can look at historical models like Ken Robinson and Charlotte Mason and other historical figures. Really research it and then sit down as a family and discuss it, because it only takes one parent to register a child in school. It also only takes one parent to deregister a child. However, there is nothing to stop your partner from registering your children in school again. So make sure everybody's on the same page. If you are a separated parent and you are co-parenting through divorce or through whatever situation you find yourself in, bear in mind that if you are going to go against your partner, you both have equal rights to oversee the educational provision of your child. So you need to be able to defend yourself and have a good relationship with your local authority to help as a third party in backing you up as providing a suitable education at home. So it can be a bit more tricky if you're a single parent, if you've got any other circumstances that would conflate issues, an unsupportive family, unsupportive neighbours, all of these things you'd need to take into consideration, and kind of weigh up the pros and the cons. At the end of the day, the only person who can make the decision about educating your child is you, because the law states very clearly that it is your responsibility for the education of your child. So even if your child is in school, you would still be responsible for the education of that child and making sure it still meets the law in Section 7, fitting the child's age, ability and aptitude. So if you sent your child to school and they were a genius and school wasn't fulfilling their requirements, it wouldn't be the school that's failing, it would be you, the parent, because it's your job to then ensure that the education they're receiving is suitable. So, you can still be failing in Section 7 of the Education Act, even if you discharge your duty onto a school. So that's a massive myth that most parents aren't aware of. Making sure everyone's on board, making sure that you know the ins and the outs, what's expected of you, what's legal, what isn't legal, and then you'll come to an informed decision. And that's the biggest mistake that every home educating parent who comes out of school or starts from scratch gets wrong, is that very initial first stage of making sure that you have studied the subject into which you are going to base your child's entire educational career on. And it's a really big decision. It's as big as getting married, buying a house, buying a car, all of these really massive decisions that require a lot of research and choice. And nobody can make that choice for you. You've got to make it yourself. And by researching it to the point where you fully understand it and the decision and the weight of the decision that you are taking, the severity and the importance, once you've done that and you've made that decision, you've made it with conviction and knowledge and with your eyes fully open to what the benefits and the risks are. Because every choice that you make is not without its downfalls. I'm not going to lie. Everybody talks about the benefits of home education, of which there are many. However, there are also downsides to it, which not many people mention. But not only will you be reassuring yourself by having researched all of this, but you will also be setting a good example to those around you and to your children, because you want your children to grow up knowing that when you have a big life decision, you don't just make it in haste. You don't just flip a coin and say whichever side it lands on, that's if you go to school. No, you really do have to bear the brunt of this and provide yourself with the information. Don't expect others to educate you.